Hey everyone, Shane here, excited to be with you today. Excited for what God is going to do today. If you have your Bible, open up to Luke chapter 7. Jesus calls us the light of the world, the salt of the earth. We are called and invited to bring life, healing, vibrancy to our relationships, to our environments that we find ourselves in, as we learn to walk in submission to Jesus and his leadership and learn to love others the way that he loves us. The challenge is in a culture characterized by division and criticism and kind of self-promotion, how do we stand out as these people? And how do we not give in and just become part of the negative noise? The cultural pressure that we're feeling right now is real. It's present in our hearts. When you just scroll through your news feed, take a minute and scroll through social media, you can feel the anxiety almost rising up. And social media itself, while it's a great way to connect and communicate, it just kind of adds fuel to the fire of the hostility, of the division, of the tension of this time. And so for us as followers of Jesus, how do we navigate these pressures? How do we respond to these moments, especially with those that are different from us, on the other side of an issue, have a different perspective, a different opinion, a different experience from us? How do we navigate those moments? Well, Jesus, for much of Luke chapter 6, has been unpacking the way of his kingdom, what it means to follow him, what it means to trust him, to walk according to his design. Jesus has a way that is different from the world's way. Jesus has a way that is better from the world's way, and he invites us into that. As he's unpacked in Luke chapter 6, now we see it in the narrative begin to be lived out by Jesus. And also he highlights and celebrates moments where he sees his kingdom being lived out by others, even some unlikely people highlighted and celebrated. So let's look to Luke chapter 7 together. Verse 1, it says, after he had finished all his sayings. This is Jesus in his kind of Sermon on the Mount, Sermon on the Plain in Luke chapter 6. After he'd finished his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion, this is a Roman military leader, had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation. And he is the one who built us our synagogue, our church. And Jesus went with them. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore, I did not presume to come to you. But say the word and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard these things, listen, he marveled at him. What an accomplishment to shock Jesus. And turning to the crowd that followed him, he said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. Verse 11, soon afterward, he went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him. As he drew near to the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a considerable crowd from the town was with her. And when the Lord saw her, Jesus, he had compassion on her and said to her, do not weep. Then he came up and touched the bier, and the bearers stood still. And he said, young man, I say to you, arise. And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, a great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people. And this report about him spread through the whole of Judea and all the surrounding country. You have to see Jesus' response to this woman. He had compassion on her. That's Jesus' number one response to people who are hurting or broken. Jesus has compassion for you. And he calls us as his people to have compassion for others. And we see these two moments of interaction, of experience with Jesus, the miracles, they could not be more contrasted with who is in these moments. You have a Roman military leader and a Jewish widow. And Jesus interacts with both of them. They both experience the blessing of his power, of his authority, of his healing in their lives, showing us that Jesus is for everyone. There is no partiality with God. He does not play favorites. He is for everyone. He is for you today. And I really want to look at the first 10 verses of this chapter and look at this man that caused Jesus to marvel and say, what was it about this Roman centurion that caused Jesus to marvel? And why would Luke, the writer of this book, include these moments here? Well, again, Luke has just unpacked for us one of Jesus' most famous teachings about his kingdom, a manifesto of sorts of here's what it looks like to live according to my design. And some of the highlights from that were that we're called to love our enemies. Jesus tells us to judge not, or if we do not want to be judged. He tells us that the fruit and the foundation of our lives are the evidence of where we're grounded, where we're founded in this life, and where we find security and hope and trust and peace, and how much we listen and hear God's words and obey them. And here Jesus begins to celebrate those things and live those things out. Think about it. He says, love your enemies. Here's a Roman military leader. He is a visible sign of the oppression of Israel, God's chosen people. And here Jesus is saying, I tell you, not in all of Israel have I found such faith. And just think about, from the perspective of Jesus' disciples, those 12 that he called to be apostles earlier in Luke chapter 6. To just think for a moment what they would be hearing, experiencing, feeling as Jesus says these words. Just a couple of those disciples. One of them was named Simon, and he had the title of Simon the Zealot. Zealot means that he was a political revolutionary, a Jewish man who was bent on overthrowing Roman oppression of Israel. That was his sole focus and aim in life prior to following Jesus. And now Jesus is saying, I'm telling you, that's an example of faith. I mean, what would Simon be thinking? What kind of humility would Simon need to be able to say, okay, that's one of my enemies. That's someone I'm opposed to, but can I actually learn from them? If Jesus is saying that's what faith looks like lived out, do I have the humility to learn from this man? Or Matthew, another one of the disciples, he was a tax collector, a Jewish man who basically had sold out his own people, was working for the Roman government as a tax collector, collecting taxes from his people, collecting a little bit more for himself at times, I'm sure. And now here he is being reminded of the old profession that Jesus called him out of by this Roman centurion being celebrated. And we see the evidence of this man's life, this Roman military leader. Man, the fruit of his life, as attested to by these Jewish leaders, these Jewish elders, reveals that his foundation, his faith is in God. And Jesus says, hey, don't judge someone too quickly. Look at the fruit, the foundation of their life it's built upon. This man was known for his love for God's people, his generosity, even building a synagogue, building a place of worship for people who were different from him, a different political affiliation, a different people group altogether. He was the demanding force, and he chose to serve and love the people around him with generosity. Man, just what honor and humility you see from this Roman man. He even says these words when he sends the second group, his friends, to Jesus. When Jesus is on the way to his house to heal his servant, he says, hold on, Jesus. I'm not worthy of such an honor. I'm not worthy to have you come into my home. That's why I didn't even presume to come to you myself. He sent Jewish leaders on his behalf. But then he realized, no, I can't have this teacher, this amazing man of God who's done these miracles, that's clearly anointed, chosen by God for a great purpose. I can't have him come into my house. I am not worthy. And this man could have flexed his military authority. He could have flexed his military power. Said, no, I demand you. You are a Jew. I'm a Roman. You will come when I call. That's the authority I have. But he chose to recognize the spiritual authority of Jesus over his own positional authority. And what an incredible display of humility, of honor. One of my good friends, he talks about it this way: we're called to honor up, down, and all around. That's what this man did. He honored up. He honored Jesus. He honored God, recognizing that your authority is greater than my own. Yes, I have soldiers, I have servants underneath me, and they jump. When I say jump, they ask me how high. Like they understand my authority, but you carry authority that is so much greater than mine, Jesus. He honored up, he honored God. He honored down. I mean, this servant of his, I mean, he was doing anything he could to seek healing, to seek wholeness for the servant of his who was sick. I mean, he honored his servant by looking for ways for him to be made whole, made well again. And then he honored all around the Jewish people, again, who were different from him. He honored in the way that he loved and served them. And that led to this reputation that the Jewish leaders were willing to come on his behalf to Jesus. They're willing to cross that cultural divide of you're Roman and we're Jewish, but we see by your life the honor that you've shown us. This man was known by his honor and then the faith that he has. Where he says, Jesus, I recognize your authority. All you have to do is simply say the word, and I know it will be done. And Jesus marvels at this man. He's like, I can't believe what I'm hearing. I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. So there is a way to Jesus' kingdom, to Jesus' people, that is different, and honor is that way. Honor is the way of Jesus. It's the way of his kingdom. It's the way of us as his people trying to follow his model, his design for our lives. But how do we become people of honor? And how do we become people who live this out in our own lives? It starts in our hearts. It starts in a posture of humility. Humility gives birth to honor. Humility in our hearts gives birth to honor. I mean, just think about the centurion recognizes that he is not worthy. Even after the Jewish leaders go and say, he is worthy, Jesus. Here's what he's done. He's deserving of this. He still says, no. I am not worthy. The humility of this man. I think about humility in our own hearts. It starts with the gospel. It starts with the truth that there is a God who loves you, who wants to have relationship with you, and he did everything possible to make that relationship available to every one of us who would believe. See, when I'm in a spot when I recognize just God's mercy in my life, that he's not treated me the way that my mistakes, my sin, the way I've hurt other people, he does not punish me the way I deserve, but he wipes the slate clean. And then not only that, but he lavishes his love, his grace, his generosity over my life and in my life. And I recognize, God, I'm so undeserving of everything you've given me, everything you've done for me. Man, when I'm in that spot, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed by God's love. I realize I am so not worthy to receive this kind of love from God. It's only because he says I am. And he paid the price to buy back this life, to bring me into relationship through the sacrifice of Jesus. Man, when I recognize the truth of the gospel in my own heart, then I'm humbled. I'm overwhelmed by God's love, and I am free to honor others. I almost in that spot don't even have just the thought or the energy to try to promote myself or put my way first or try to convince someone else that I'm right and they're wrong or whatever issue I might be talking about. Like, man, I'm just overwhelmed by God's love and God's grace, and it results in this honor of others in my life. And I also see, man, when I have a hard time honoring others, when I'm consumed with my own perspective, my own ambitions, my own desires, at a personal heart level, I am disconnected from the gospel and God's grace in my life. The gospel is what makes honor possible in my life when I am humbled, overwhelmed by God's love and what he's done for me. Proverbs 18:12, it says it this way. Pride first, then the crash. Pride in our hearts leads to failure and downfall. But humility is precursor to honor. Humility gives birth to honor. Paul writes this to the church in Philippi in chapter 2 of Philippians. He says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. Listen, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Humility is saying, my ideas are not the most important. My perspective, Not only is it not the only perspective, it might not even be the right or the best perspective. Humility is to say, I'm going to lay my wants, my goals, my desires, I'm going to lay those to the side to understand what others desire and want, and how I can come alongside and serve them in humility. Humility gives birth to honor, that we would actually take a genuine interest in others and their hopes, their goals, their dreams, their ambitions, and not just like politely nod and smile and pretend to be interested, but actually care. This is hard. This is hard for me to really set aside my agenda and say, okay, God, you have this person that I'm in relationship with. How would you work through me to encourage, to come alongside, to help bring about your work in their lives and their hearts? Man, when we seek to honor others instead of promoting ourselves, promoting our own agenda, our own ideas, or trying to get ahead, we look different. We are different. We are these kind of people. We are becoming Jesus' church, the people God called us to be, created us to be, desires that we would be in the world to show the world what our God is like, his heart, his love, his compassion. Paul says it this way to another church written to Rome, chapter 12. He says, love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Like, what if honor was a competition? What if we weren't competing for who was the best, the brightest, the most talented, who had the best ideas? But what if the competition was, how can we outpace one another in showing honor? I mean, just picture if you're married, picture in your marriage for a moment, how your marriage would look different if it was a competition between you and your spouse to honor one another. Honor literally means to come underneath and to lift up or to elevate another. It's to desire to put myself in a lower position so I can come underneath someone else and help them rise, help them grow. That is the picture of honor. Like, just imagine in your marriage if that's how your marriage was characterized. Was this mutual submission. You're both trying to come under the other to help the other grow, to help the other thrive. You're valuing, appreciating each other, honoring one another. What would that do in that one relationship? And then apply that to all the other relationships, maybe at work, with your kids, with your friends, with your neighbors, those you're in relationship with. How would your relationships look different if honor was the number one characterization? I just think about some practical ways is how can we make honor a competition? How can we cultivate a culture of honor among us as God's people and among those that we interact with? I just think about, for me, when I'm in a spot of trying to honor others, I need to listen more and speak less. When it's about my ideas, my agenda, my interests, I just want to get across what I want to tell you. But in a spot of honor, it says, no, I want to understand you more than I want to be understood. I don't just want to hear your words. Like, I want to understand the heart behind it. Like, I want to understand the emotion, the motivation, even the experiences that you've gone through that got you there. It might not be the same perspective that I have. It might not be the same way I would look at that, but I want to value and honor your perspective, and I want to understand the heart and what you're saying. I want to truly put myself in someone else's position, in someone else's place, and go, what would it be like if I had gone through what they've gone through, experienced what they've experienced, or those that you don't know what they've experienced, to allow the unknown to even birth honor and humility, to go, I have no idea what they've experienced that's gotten them to where they are, that would cause them to maybe respond that way, to say that. And so who am I to judge? If I had experienced those things, where would I be? There's a phrase that we've said a lot around here, that I want to be idealistic with myself and realistic with others. I mean, I want to hold myself to the high standard of continuing to grow and recognizing that I need a lot of grace and I have a lot of room to grow, but I want to be realistic with others. I want to extend grace. And when there's a gap of the unknown, the uncertainty, I want to fill that gap with assuming the best, not assuming the worst. This is the way of honor, the way of Jesus' people. I think about just the impact of complimenting each other and with specificity, appreciating one another. I appreciate this about you with words. And I would even say in this digital age, when you take the time and you actually write that down on a card or a note, you put pen to paper, it shows that you had the thoughtfulness. Like I have a prayer that my wife wrote in this Bible years ago that I will come back to in times I'm discouraged, in times I'm doubting, times I'm frustrated, times I'm battling depression. I will read this prayer and my wife's encouragement, her honor of me, her lifting me up to God in this prayer, it just fills my heart with peace, with joy. And man, when we're in positions of trying to honor others and not trying to get our own perspective across, I believe that is the spot of ultimate joy. That brings peace to my heart because I'm trying to understand others, not trying to get my agenda across. We honor God when we honor each other. When you make a conscious decision to honor someone else, you are honoring God. God, the creator and sustainer of all life, the one who breathed life into every man, woman, and child on this planet. When you honor the one who bears his image, you honor the creator who put his image within them. And that's why in this time of pressure and tension in our country, in our world, especially around the conversation of racism, this is why we as followers of Jesus have to step into this conversation, because it is not okay for anyone to be treated as less than or inferior because of their nationality, color of skin, gender, what have you, because they are all image bearers of God. And we are called to honor God, and we honor him when we honor those who are made in his image. And as we learn to cultivate honor in our hearts, as humility gives birth to honor, we grow in faith as well. So we recognize this progression, this story of the centurion. You see the humility where he says, Jesus, I'm not worthy. You see the honor where he says, Jesus, I know you are in so much greater authority than I even wield myself in commanding so many others. And you see the faith where he says, Jesus, just speak the word. See, humility is to know my place. Humility is to know my place. Say, God, you've been so good to me. God, you breathe life into these lungs. God, you've brought me back into relationship with you, and I did nothing to initiate that myself. You did everything. God, I'm so unworthy of your love, but you say I'm worthy, because you've given me the identity that I could never earn myself. You just give it to me as a gift when I surrender and believe in Jesus. Humility is to know my place. Honor is to know Jesus' place. Honor is to know Jesus' place. Jesus, you are Lord. You are God. You are the creator and the sustainer of everything. This life is yours. You are master. You are leader. I am following you. I am coming under your leadership because your way is best. You're the king. And I am just simply blessed to be part of your kingdom. So I surrender everything to you. Humility to know my place. Honor to know Jesus' place. And then faith. Faith is just applied. Faith is the humility and the honor brought together and lived out in our lives. It's what leads the centurion to say, Jesus, I'm not worthy. I know you will have all authority. Just say the word and my servant will be made well. He will be made whole. Humility plus honor equals faith, birthed and grown in our hearts. James, the half-brother of Jesus, says it this way. He says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. When you and I humble ourselves before God, we honor him. He will exalt us. He will grow us in our faith. The invitation today is that we would become people of God's kingdom, people of honor. That this would start with humility in our hearts. If you've never said yes to Jesus, you've never experienced the life that only he can give, We see in both of these moments, the moment where Jesus heals the servant, and the moment where he raises his dead man, he speaks the words. He speaks to this dead man. I say to you, rise and get up. Jesus wants to speak to your heart, your soul today. He wants to bring spiritual life where there's been death. Would you hear him speak those words today? And would you respond? Would you say, Jesus, I believe you're calling me to say yes to you. You're calling me to surrender. You're calling me to come under your leadership and experience a life that is truly life. The life that I believe only you could give. Jesus, say the word. You're speaking now. He's speaking to you now. Would you hear his word and respond to his invitation to know him? He loves you. He sees you. He has the best life possible for you, but it's only possible when you come under his leadership, when you surrender to his design, his authority in your life. He wants to speak. He is speaking to your heart today. I want to give you an opportunity, invite you to respond. We want to walk with you in that response. We want to celebrate whatever God's calling you to as a next step today, that we would become people of honor, people who surrender to Jesus in humility, and that would overflow into our relationships. Whatever next step God's calling you to take, whether it's to put your faith in him for the very first time, to connect into relationship, to learn what it means to give and sacrifice for his kingdom. Man, there's a number on the screen you can text. There's a website there. You can go online, fill out that online connection card. We want to walk with you in whatever response God is calling you to take today. Let me pray. Jesus, we love you and we trust you. God, we humble ourselves before you. You are God. I am not. Your way is best. God, would you ground us in the truth of the gospel? Would you remind us, God, of your love, your grace, your goodness, your generosity towards us, and would that birth a humility that then gives birth to honor in our relationship with you first and foremost, and then with those around us, God. God, we believe that you have called us to look different from the ways of this world. Not in a posture of arrogance, but in a posture of example, that we live out, not perfectly, but we live out by your Spirit inside of us, what it means to be these kind of people who honor well. God, would your church shine bright as the light of the world. God, would your people bring healing and flavor to their relationships as the salt of the earth. We love you. We trust you. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.